Kate, thank you so much for being here today. This is a really heartfelt episode because your work has actually touched me in more ways than you know. For those that don't know, Kate Helder is the founder and managing director of Mind Heart Connect Foundation. She's also an EFT practitioner and teacher. That is emotional freedom technique, otherwise known as tapping. And her work centers largely around helping frontline workers with their psychological and emotional resilience so that they don't burn out and they don't bring secondary trauma back home with them, which is incredibly important for those that are on the front line and serving people that are vulnerable members of the community. But what's really interesting about Kate's story is, she's not originally from the healing world. She's got a background in corporate, and there's a fascinating story there that I want to dig into. But before we do that, I just want to highlight that your work and the practices that you share with the community, Kate, have given me access to parts of myself that have previously been very difficult too. And you've really helped normalize the conversation around emotional well-being and healing, especially for me during a time when it felt quite foreign through your events and through our mutual connection, Emma. So it's a real gift to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I just want to acknowledge too the wonderful work you're doing with this podcast. Having met you at our event in 2023 and then, touching in with you again and listening to your podcast and really getting a sense of your depth and the key messaging that you're wanting to put out into the broader community, and the fact that it is coming from someone many years younger than me is really heartening, because I think it's important that we have access to tools and techniques prior to getting into our latter years in life.
I appreciate that, Kate. Thank you. Now, I wanted to start from the beginning, especially around your experience in the corporate world, because I've read your book and you talk a lot about being outwardly successful, but internally crumbling. And also you've described yourself as the party girl of that era as well. So can you elaborate more on what that experience was like for you in that high performance, high pressure corporate environment, and what was really going on for you behind the scenes as well?
Yeah, wow, it seems an absolute lifetime ago, which is really nice to sort of come through the other side. I think for me in the 80s and 90s, it was very much my role was working in a family business, and a lot of the expectation was driven by family. And I certainly felt that I was always living up to what others wanted to see of me, what front it was I had to put on, what persona or what robes I was wearing to be able to be this individual that needed to just slot into a particular system, a particular way of being in the world. And what I found was, as much as I think initially I was quite excited to be in that world, it looked pretty fancy. It was working in the fashion industry, importing and wholesaling, and a lot of travel, a lot of interstate travel, a lot of overseas travel. And, in the 80s and 90s, the world was a much smaller place. And I think to be a young female in my early 20s flying business class to the other side of the world, I thought I was pretty good. And attending different trade fairs and shows and hooking up with others from Australia and people overseas to not only do the work we needed to do, but, we had a great time partying. There was plenty of that going on. And I think for me, it was really one morning when I woke up in a hotel room in Florence, and it was about 3:00 in the morning, and it was like this big booming voice. If you keep on doing this, you're not going to live a very long life. And those words stuck with me. And then there was this sequence of events and synchronicities of people showing up that were supporting that message I heard at 3 o'clock in the morning. I think initially when I heard it, I sort of double guessed myself and went, seriously, what was that? But that was really the start of my inquiry into what else was it that perhaps I was meant to be doing in the world. And I was in a wonderful colleague's store up in the Gold Coast, and I was chatting with him. I'd spent some time with he and his wife in Italy at a particular trade fair. And his wife at the time actually wrote this beautiful numerology chart for me and sent it to me. And one of the things she just wrote at the end was, Kate, you have a lot of sevens in your chart, and this is your journey into the spiritual realm. And at the time when I read it, I went, oh yeah, whatever. And it didn't land for me. But when I was in this guy's shop, David, and I actually saw him not so long ago and told him what his wise words had sent me on this particular trajectory. He said to me, so, Kate, how are you? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, good, thanks. And he said, no, how are you really? And here I was standing in this guy's beautiful store, and I just felt these tears well up inside me. And I was the sort of person who pretty much kept a lid on everything, and I didn't share my emotions outwardly unless, of course, I'd had way too much to drink and being the party girl, which was a very different side. I felt like there was a lot of Jekyll and Hyde going on for me. And as these tears welled as I was standing in his shop, the words that came to me was, I don't know what else I'm meant to be doing. And that's what then grounded me in this, I don't know what else I'm meant to be doing. There's a very long backstory to this in relation to where I went after that particular meeting. I sobbed for 3 or 4 days. I returned home to my husband and got out of the car, and he said, what's wrong with you? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's our marriage. I don't know if it's where I am with work. I just don't know where it is, but I'm just feeling so lost. And that was really the first time I owned it. And then it was from there I sat in this space of not knowing. But I just knew that those words that came to me at 3 in the morning, if I didn't pay attention to what I believe that was my innate wisdom, it wasn't a voice from above. If I didn't pay attention to that, where will I be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time? And what came to me was I could effectively lose my marriage, possibly. I didn't know at that time whether I wanted to have children or not. And it was a real sort of time of where everything felt like it had just been thrown up in the air. And I didn't know where any of it was going to land, but I just knew in my heart of hearts, as I sat with it, I needed to leave the family business. And I then shared my concerns with my aunt, who was very English and very traditional. And the most beautiful thing that she said to me was, it's really important that you just follow your heart. She said, when I came out to Australia when I was 18 years old and I was thrown into the family business, she said, all I ever wanted to do was be an occupational therapist. And she said, and I haven't done any of that. And I really want to see you go and follow your dreams. So you've got my full support. So then that made it a little bit easier when I had to broach the subject with my father. And as much as he was bitterly disappointed, he was very gracious and understanding. And that was really then the start of an opening for me to then explore what was it that I wanted to do. And even that in itself, I didn't know what direction I was going to be going, but I just started following the crumbs.
Thank you, Kat. I think what you touched on towards the end is something that a lot of people listening resonate with, and certainly I do, which is around, when you have put on this mask and this persona to try and fit in the environment, whether it's family or a corporate job, or a family business, and then, you hear that calling or you feel that tug, and then choose to follow it, and end up dealing with the disappointment of those around you, especially those closest to you. I know there are a lot of people in my circles who are carrying a huge sense of guilt and shame for choosing to do what they feel called to do as opposed to perhaps what their parents or their boss expects of them. So how have you dealt with the disappointment, the bitterness of dad and those around you when you decided to make that move?
I think it was just something I had within inside me that I knew that I just needed to follow this path. It was like an innate calling. There was something greater than me that was just helping to draw me towards whatever the next thing was I needed to do. And, Dad wasn't bitter, he was disappointed. And I think I just started by thinking, well, what is it I might like to do? My mum studied naturopathy in the 70s. She was kind of ahead of her time. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll go and study some nutrition. So I did nutrition course. I thought that was what I was going to do. I did that for 12 months and then I dropped out again because I realised that I actually didn't want to be in a place where I was working with people once they were already unwell. And I think the other thing too that I noticed through all my work in the family business, because I was in a sales role, was I enjoyed the conversations with people far more than I did in relation to what the sales figures were for that particular meeting. It was kind of like I'd come out of there and go, oh, yeah, no problems, you didn't order, that's okay, we'll see you next time around. And it was always the depth and the connection in conversation and really touching into other people's lives that helped to support me in whichever direction I wanted to go. I dabbled in lots of different things. I had a husband who thought I was completely mad when I first made the decision because, hey, I was earning good income, company car, travelling, all that sort of thing. And I had other friends too who would say, Kate, do you really know what you're giving up? Like, seriously? And I remember it was this one Christmas holiday we were camping up on the Murray River, up on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. And a girlfriend who was in real estate, she thought my world was fantastic and everything I was doing was, oh, you're so lucky. And she was one who said to me, do you really realise what you're giving up? And I looked across at my company car because I hadn't handed it back then. And I went, yeah, I do. And it will be okay. And it was just that sense of trust. But I think also too, having had a mother who delved into personal growth in the era in the 60s and 70s where it wasn't really that popular, having her understanding and support of the fact that I wanted to follow a different path, I think that's what allowed me to find that balance between the two camps of, the naysayers and then, sure, follow your dreams. And I think too, it was one of those things where when we have that sense within ourselves that whatever it is that we're doing right now feels aligned, that's where we just need to stay for now and try not to jump too far ahead. So I did lots of, I'm just staying in it for now, and then followed that. And when something didn't work out, I didn't necessarily treat it as a failure. It was like, oh, well, that's not where I'm meant to be. That's where I thought I was. And at the time too, I'd read that book by, can't think of his name, someone Spencer, Who Moved My Cheese. Have you ever read that?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
It's a tiny thin book, and I actually read it on the plane coming back from that Queensland trip where I was sobbing for several days and finished it in the plane. It was effectively the story of you've always gone to that same spot for your nourishment, and then all of a sudden the cheese has been moved, and then it's like, well, where am I going? And then all the different maze you need to go through to find that. So I think it was really just having that sense of inner trust and belief that However it was going to be okay. And as much as my partner, my husband, thought I was completely mad, I did have his full support. And there were times when he possibly said, Kate, you've just got to go out and get a job. And I went, I'm not doing it. So I just knew I needed to stay the course. And I made things work so that I could still contribute to our little family unit. And yeah, it's just that sense of trust.
Well, I really honour your courage, Kate, because it takes a boatload of that and resilience to keep on moving into the next thing that feels right and seeing it to its completion, then moving to the next and still having that unwavering sense of belief in yourself. It's very rare and it's really admirable. Where do you think that comes from? Like that inner trust or that inner calling that's palpable? What do you think that is?
If I just sort of turned inwards now to ask that question, it would really be when we get still enough and we're quiet enough and we just allow that pause, what we need to know will come forward in that moment. I think we're so directed by society, our educational system, the expectation of others in various places of employment that we always need to be striving for whatever the next thing is. And we don't necessarily allow and give ourselves that space-time continuum that we all need in any moment, no matter what it is, whether it's a traumatic incident that's happened or great loss or somebody's cut you off in the traffic. We've all got that opportunity to respond differently. And I think it really just came from that inner knowing without necessarily at the time, I didn't have the language around it at the time. It was just that felt sense and just being in a position where I was committed to make a change, even though I didn't know what the change was and where I was meant to be heading. It just felt grounded within me. And I think the more that we can stay true to ourselves in relation to that, that's probably one of the most important pieces of the puzzle.
I love that. And spot on around the noise and the distractions that are competing for our attention. And I think making it incredibly hard to connect to that inner knowing when you're clouded by expectations that others have of you. So, and that's been a big part of my journey as well. And even this podcast show that we're on at the moment has come from that place of, well, this feels like the right thing to do and I'm committed to it and I'm not really sure where it will take me. But I think like Steve Jobs said, it's like you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards, but you just have to trust that they will connect. So how did the dots from the family business to the dot of EFT and healing and emotional well-being connect for you?
As I said, sales and marketing was something that came naturally to me. And I think for a lot of people, if you enjoy communication and you enjoy meeting others, it's actually a really good path to go down. And I think that what I found was having left the family business, doing some study, doing some other sales roles, all sort of related to health and well-being, that I came to a point this one day where I was working on a particular project with a friend. We were planning a small event in relation to some essential oil products for emotional well-being, and we were doing some work. And this one particular day, I walked in through her front door. Apparently, I'd slammed the front gate. I wasn't even aware I'd slammed the front gate, but I was just getting on and being me. And she said, would you like a cup of tea? Yep, that would be great. And I was just sitting on the other side of her kitchen bench. And she said, I just want you to follow me. And she started tapping on these particular acupressure points on the top of her head, side of the eye, etc. And as she was tapping, she said, just follow along with me. I thought she was completely off her chops. Like, what is she doing? And then I thought, well, if we want to get any work done today, I'll just tap along with her. And what happened from that one time of this particular friend showing me the technique, I found over the course of a 6-month period as I was working on this project with her, that I was feeling less reactive to situations. And I was not working with a practitioner or anything with the tapping, but it just allowed me to feel more grounded in my body and less reactive. So that was just a seed that was planted. And I'm a fairly curious kind of individual, and having noticed that for myself, I really had that moment of, isn't it incredible that for all this time and thinking I wanted to go and study nutrition and working in health and wellbeing in the sales industry I thought it was just whatever it was we were putting into our bodies, the physical form. I hadn't really correlated the whole emotional wellbeing piece of the puzzle. And that was a turning point for me. So I went off and attended an emotional freedom techniques training. I came out of that training walking down the steps knowing that I wanted to take what I had learned in this technique out into the broader community. And I just had this knowing. It was like, it was a felt sense again. And I'd done a few other things, but it was this sense of, I would really love to do this. And at the time, I had recently created a sort of resource deck of cards. It was called Toolbox Time. It looked great. I developed it with another friend of mine, business partner at the time, and we'd attended the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival and went with all our boxes and boxes of product that we thought we were going to sell. And I think by day 3, we were thinking, wow, we've got a lot of products still sitting here. Why was it we really came here for this? And driving into the festival that morning, I just had again this felt sense that there was something more, but I didn't know, again, what that more was. And as we were getting close to the end of the 3rd day and we weren't quite packing up, a particular person, Dr Peter Stapleton, who is well-renowned for her research with emotional freedom techniques, stumbled across our stand. And I met her, we exchanged business cards, and I said, I don't know what it is, but would you be okay if I contacted you in the new year? She said, sure, give me a call. So I did. I contacted her in 2015. I think it was the January 2015. And at that time, I'd also been fortunate enough through developing this deck of cards to meet a world-renowned trauma healing specialist in the US, Dr. Laurie Layden. And she and I had been chatting, and I said, I've got this vision, I don't know, but I'd love to create an event where we can bridge the skepticism across into what is the realms of evidence-based techniques that support people's emotional well-being. And so anyway, after speaking with Laurie, I then plucked up the courage and contacted Peter, and then ended up and going meeting with her in the Gold Coast and said, I think we'd really love to do an event. Are you in? She said, sure, I'm in. So again, it was just this following the threads, it was following the crumbs, it was whatever felt right to do, that was just the next thing. And it was like the universe conspired to bring all these people into my world. And if you'd said 10 years prior or 5 years prior, this is what you're going to be doing now, Kate, I would have said, oh, what a load of rubbish. That's not going to happen. But the gift of meeting the right people and the right people showing up continued to support that sense of, yes, I'm on the right path, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And even in all the moments, running events is not easy. And in the moments leading up to our inaugural event in 2017 on the Gold Coast, it was like, oh, okay, well, who else would be a really good keynote speaker? And we're thinking, oh, I don't know, Dr Joe Dispenza would be good, and be like, oh, yeah, well, has anyone got his contacts? Peter managed to find a contact, and it was very handy having Peter in the position she was in as, at the time, Associate Professor of Psychology at Bond University. And we were able to reach out to Dr Joe Dispenza's team, and I think it was a few days before Christmas that year that his team responded and said, yeah, actually, Dr Joe's going to be in Australia and he can be able to do a presentation for your event. I swear at the time it was like that was the biggest gift, because we didn't have the numbers, we didn't have the following. We held this vision of what we really wanted to bring into the community, and yet it really was with that first event. And bless you, Dr Joe, thank you very much for being very much a part of that event and having his followers come, that allowed us to break even on the first event that we did, which was a highlight. And then from that, other events followed, and the foundation was formed as a result of that.
Wow. What a boon from the universe. That's outstanding. I'm a huge Dr. Joe fan, and yeah, he's heavily impacted me in my work. It's so reaffirming when you have those chance encounters with Dr. Lisa Miller. She's I don't know if you've heard of her. She's a researcher, professor at New York, I think, around consciousness. But she talks about trail angels, like angels that you meet along your trail that sort of step in and support you and guide you. And so that's so heartwarming to see those pieces come together. And before we even go deeper into EFT, how it works, what it is, how it helps people, something you shared before, when you went into your friend's home that you were working on the project with, was a lessening in reactivity to situations. And so I want to just dig into that, because I think everyone can relate to that, whether consciously or unconsciously. What does reactivity look like? And perhaps maybe what has reactivity to situations look like for you? Whether we're talking about emotional triggers and yeah, how that manifested for you before you entered the world of tapping.
I was extremely reactive, and I certainly, even just you talking about that now, I have flashbacks of when something didn't happen the way I thought it wanted to go. And I had moments of rage and outrage, and I really feel at the time I was quite volatile in the way my emotional landscape appeared. And for me, without knowing tapping, and without knowing not even just tapping, but other grounding techniques, because tapping's one thing, it's one tool in the toolbox. We will all find something that resonates for us. But for me at the time, being highly reactive, quite angry at times, without having this new emotional regulation tool in my toolkit, my world and relationships was very different to how it is today. And I feel that through my evolution and the work that I have done around my emotional well-being and my reactivity, and what possibly may have triggered me in the past that doesn't trigger me today, I come to it now from a sense of curiosity in relation to, isn't that funny? 5 years ago, that would have sent me off the rails. But today, I just notice that I'm able to come to a place where I can find that pause before I do react. And this is very much a part of the work that I have studied with Dr. Laurie Layden. She has a formula called the grace process. And it's quite a simple formula on paper, but when you actually spend the time to work on various elements of it for yourself, it can be very, very deep work. So if you think of a formula, C being choice point, and then we look at what judgments we may be holding and whether the judgments are of ourselves, another, or the circumstance we're in. And Laurie too also refers to the divine or the universe or however that looks. And then we see if there's any forgiveness that may be required. Is the forgiveness of myself another, the circumstance? And then when we do that work, we have the choice point, judgment minus forgiveness. That's when we can move into greater states, as Laurie would say, of gratitude, love, joy, and wonder. And we think about wonder, and it's not just, I wonder how that's going to turn out. It's being in the wonder of how could this look? How could this be different? So I think having those tools and having done the work and really embodying that for myself first, that's been the game changer for me. To be able to come to situations now knowing that everything is being held in the right time frame. And as Eckhart Tolle is always saying to us, there really is only the present moment. And when we can hold that present moment from a grounded place, a place of curiosity and a place of calm, we then will find that we won't react in the same way that we always have done so in the past.
I'm really curious to learn more about the grace process, but I think something that stuck out to me is forgiveness, something I've struggled with in my past, forgiving others, forgiving myself. Why do you think many people struggle with forgiveness?
I think sometimes too, and I think it's another societal thing, that if we are to forgive, that might be showing signs of weakness. Or if I forgive that person for that thing, that means that what they did to me is okay. But while we hold on to any judgment around something, if we can't bring that piece of forgiveness in, the only individual it's doing harm to is yourself, not the other. They're walking around mindlessly, not even knowing that what they've said to you or done has impacted you in that way, or they may. But the forgiveness piece is the most underutilised yet beautifully rich part of the process that then gives us the opportunity to feel that sense of freedom. And we're not saying that that thing didn't happen and I forgive them. We're saying I can hold that forgiveness piece and feel it land in your body, not just, okay, I forgive you. It's like really feel the forgiveness through every cell of your body, that too can be true. And the freedom in that is life-changing.
So true. It reminds me of a quote. I'm not sure who said it, but like holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. So yeah, ultimately, we're putting ourselves in harm's way emotionally and psychologically. So, and you talked about that felt sense, so it's not like cognitively saying, oh, well, forgive and forget, but the body's still holding on to anger and rage and resentment. So, and that's been, again, like a huge dichotomy in my journey around learning how to feel in the body to release the charge of dense, suppressed emotions that I've held on to. How is tapping different as we go deeper into it? Like, how is tapping different to, say, conventional talk therapy, for instance, where for the most part it's largely cognitive and intellectual?
Well, tapping is a beautiful mix of both. So it's utilising cognitive talk therapy while we're actually tapping on known acupressure points, which we know the ancient wisdom in relation to acupuncture and acupressure. It's been around for a very long time. It's not woo-woo energy. And so what we find that with tapping as a self-applied stress reduction technique, the tapping process with the statements that are used in a clinical setting when you're working with a practitioner, the combination that then allows the autonomic nervous system to become regulated. If we think of the brain and we think of our amygdala as our smoke detector, and the hippocampus is the memory centre of the brain. The tapping process down-regulates the usual response that you would have from those particular parts of the brain. And when that happens, we then gain access to the prefrontal cortex, where we have our higher functioning. So that's where we can access solutions to problems. So if you think of somebody saying something to you and you feel quite reactive about it, it may well be that the amygdala has fired. It's the smoke detector. Hang on a minute, what's been said here? That sounds familiar. You're not safe. And then if we can just regulate our autonomic nervous system through tapping to support ourselves to come back into the moment and to be present in the moment, we then gain that access to the prefrontal cortex of the brain again. But if you think we're staying in that heightened state of the smoke alerts going off, we can't access that part of our brain. So therefore we respond with something that's not necessarily the most appropriate, or I can't believe that just came out of my mouth. Oh, I'm so sorry. So the tapping is a beautiful process to use as a somatic body-based tool. And I think what we've found, and Dr. Peter Stapleton talks about it on her podcast, The Fourth Wave of Therapy, is that these body-based somatic tools are very effective. And it's not just saying that we're holding that trauma and stress in our body. We are holding it in our physiology, but it's the fact that the brain has not been able to process in a different way.
What kind of difference would a practice like that make for, let's say, a professional or a leader who, might be reactive in their workplace or business or relationships?
So with the tapping, what we find, and through the work of our foundation, the Mind Heart Connect Foundation, is we're training frontline workers who they might be clinical psychologists or it might be management. And they're working with individuals who come from some of the most traumatised environments and communities. So people in those roles, you want them to be as calm and as regulated as they can possibly be when they're in these different circumstances. So the research shows, and there's mountains of research out there, that utilising the tapping, and whether it be something as simple as what we call tap and breathe, and it is simply tap and breathe on these prescribed points, we can gain that sense of calm within ourselves. We can gain that sense of clarity again, rather than going from a highly emotive state. And I'll just give a quick example here. So recently we had delivered training to an organisation up in the Northern Rivers region in New South Wales, and the particular mental health practitioner who'd been part of the training, she was out in the field responding to a young individual who was quite suicidal at the time and was literally on a shelf ready to jump. And they knew they didn't really have a lot of resources they could use. And having come straight from the training and being able to utilise the tap and breathe for themselves, and knowing that what they felt in their body was true for them, why don't they give it a try? And they just had this individual regulate their nervous system by having the trust with that particular person who was there, just saying, I just want you to follow me. And they would be tapping and breathing. And in that process, if you think it can happen for someone when they're at that point of wanting to take their own lives, if we can use that for ourselves in a moment of a stress response, that is a game changer in the workplace. The other thing we've found too is that something as simple as tap and breathe, if you are going through your normal workday and you make a commitment to yourself that you might just try using this every hour on the hour during your waking hours, the effect is accumulative. So your nervous system is getting used to a new way of being. So if we do that for ourselves and then we're in a senior role and we have a meeting coming up or a discussion, or we need to say to somebody, I'm sorry, we've got to let you go, you can come to it from a very different place rather than feeling held back or reactive to the situation or the fact, how come I need to say this to the individual?
So groundbreaking. Yeah, and I've certainly noticed in myself and in clients that I share this with is it seems to like lengthen the distance between the stimulus and my response. It's like I have so much more breathing room, which has I think is such a gift to give not only to ourselves but everyone, who enters our sphere, because we naturally co-regulate around others. So, what an important tool to have in our back pocket to help everyone. And so I think with that said, I'd love for you, Kate, to actually guide us through a tap and breathe so those playing along at home can get a taste of what it's like. Of course, if you're driving, don't do this or pull over. But over to you, Kate.
Okay.
Take us through it.
Oh, I'd just like if you are seated somewhere and you can just feel your butt in the seat, your feet on the ground, and it doesn't matter if you have your eyes open or your eyes closed for this particular purpose. And for simplicity, we're just going to take a gentle breath, and I'm going to ask you to just go to the top of your head, the crown of your head, and just start tapping gently as you take a nice gentle inhale and exhale. And the next point is just at the start of the eyebrow, near the bridge of your nose, and take another inhale and exhale. And then the side of the eye, another gentle breath in and out. And then under the eye and out, under the nose and out, under the lips and out, just under your collarbone and out, and just under your arm and out. And just keep your eyes closed if they're closed, or open, and just notice what you notice in your breath, in your body, what thoughts might have popped in, and just feel the difference. And that's the simplicity of tap and breathe. And with tapping, the clinical EFT, they start at the start of the eyebrow point. With the foundations work and for simplicity, we just start at the top of the head. It's easier for people to remember. And that's just one of, I think there's something like 47 or 48 different techniques under the Emotional Freedom Techniques banner. And with the foundation and our training, we only teach 3 of the techniques. Tap and breathe, the basic Emotional Freedom Techniques protocol where you're introducing words, and then another one, just container boxing up. So we don't go into a lot of depth in a one-day training with what we deliver, but we're just providing tools that will support the frontline workers for them to be far more regulated in the workplace and in themselves. And I think the beauty of sharing this with others, witnessing what has been possible in the field, now having trained, I think we're over 600 frontline workers that we've trained now throughout Australia, is seeing people come back again and again and share stories when we run our mentoring of what's been possible for them in community. And that for me is one of the most heartening things. Having walked out of that training back in 2014, I think it was, knowing that I wanted to take this to the broader community, and then having those moments of, wow, this is what's possible. They're the signs and symptoms that just, I suppose, fuel you to keep doing with whatever it is you're doing and following your passion.
Thank you, Kate. That was sublime. Yeah, very, very peaceful and grounding, and I'm really inspired by the impact that your organisation has made. And I understand there have been countless stories of the ripple effects of this technique and this philosophy in communities. But I understand that there's one. Well, there's one that's certainly stuck with me that you've shared in the past around a counsellor in the Kimberley. If you'd like to share that one.
Sure. So back in 2018, I think it was, when we did one of our first trainings in Western Australia, and we delivered it in Broome, and I thought I was going to Broome to lie by the beach. No, it wasn't. I hadn't been there, but it was a time where it was really an eye-opening experience for me, going out on country, seeing really what was going on in community, and then coming away from that knowing that we really needed to take this to the frontline workers. And we had this training, and it was when Dr. Laurie Latham was very involved with the foundation, as she was an integral part of helping us establish it. And obviously Emma came in to support us too. And a particular individual, Marianne, who was at that training at the time, she thought she was just going to go along to the training for a bit of a junket to get herself out of Derby, which is about an hour and a half north of Broome. And she attended the training, and what she witnessed for herself was placing that sense of curiosity. Because when you do some of this work with tapping, you never come out the same as you went in. There is always a shift. And the training we were delivering at that time was over 2 or 4 days, so it was quite intensive. And Marianne came away from that particular training and was intrigued. And she just started doing tap and breathing in her office environment. And then she thought, why am I still doing this, working in, admin role in government, local government? And she thought, I think I want to be a counsellor. So she went off, she studied counselling, she became a counsellor, she did further training in the tapping, and then she shared this most incredible story with us, that one of the women she'd been working with in a counselling setting for a good period of 6 months, doing weekly clinical tapping sessions. So this isn't just tap and breathe, this is working on a traumatic event. And this particular woman, Glenis, whose son had committed suicide 20 plus years prior, had been carrying the weight of his suicide with her every single day. She was consumed by what had happened 20 plus years ago. And over the period of 6 months, and as Marianne said, excuse me, it was like bringing the white elephant into the room in relation to this tapping process. But what was possible for Glenis after utilising the tapping for that period of time was she no longer felt, that burden of the trauma. She still held the memory, but it did not hold the charge within her body. And then what Marianne had found with Glenis was that Glenis then wanted to share that with some of the other mothers in her community. Now, Derby is a remote community that I can't think what the population is, but they had a period there where once a month they had a young individual take their life by suicide. And that would have the ripple effect within the community. So Glenis started a group called Mothers of Angels because she wanted to be able to provide a safe haven for other mums to just be able to come and be in mob and yarn. And when time permitted or she felt comfortable, Marianne and Glenis would share tapping within that group. And witnessing that ripple effect of something so seemingly simple within community is quite profound. And as a result of that, for any of those mothers, if they too want to do deeper work, they've got a counsellor there in their community who can do it with them.
That's really, really special. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's wild how something so, seemingly simplistic and accessible can transform someone's life in that way, because the weight of that is such a heavy burden to carry around for anyone and for any family member, and that just sounds so freeing for her. And yeah, I'm grateful that there are stories like these of inner work being able to spread out far and wide beyond the initial recipient of it, which I think speaks to the immense value of what's going on here. And I think because I noticed there was a distinction between tap and breathe and the conventional tapping technique with statements. So I'm curious to just around the mechanics of what's going on, especially for Glenis in this case, or anyone really who is still holding on to emotional weight from the past. May not necessarily be someone suiciding, but it could be the guilt and shame from upbringing, or grief of the loss of a loved one or a relationship, and they're feeling it in their chest, in their stomach, and it's weighing on them. If someone were to go about this process, in the same way that Glenis did, what's happening there at like a physiological level that allows that emotion to, like you say, to be discharged?
Yeah. So the beautiful thing with tapping is that when you're working in a clinical setting is that we're stating what is true for us in this moment. And the practitioner that you're working with is only ever using your words and directing the process. So in doing that and using the acupressure points, as we said earlier, if we're down regulating that autonomic nervous response and it's coming back into balance, and we have access to the higher functioning and thinking part of our brain, we come up with our own solutions to a problem. And that's one of the key differences to talk therapy, where you can talk about what's happened. The practitioner you're working with can provide a framework and suggest these are the things that I'd like you to move forward with, but it's not your own solution. And the beauty with working in a clinical setting and having people come up with their, what we call a reframe, that's where the juice is, and that's where it's your words. You felt it within yourself. It has come from within you. It's not somebody else telling you what to do. And that's the difference of working in these settings. And I think what's really important to note too is a lot of people might say, oh, I've tried tapping and it doesn't work for me. Or I tried it once before. There is so much information out there on the web. There are so many different types of tapping. There can be tapping scripts, there can be tapping meditations, etc. But they are not using your own words for what is going on for you now. So I recall having a situation where a particular pattern kept reoccurring, and then it wasn't until I did that piece of work on myself and came up with my own solution that the emotional charge that I'd been holding for that period of time was then released. Still had the memory of what it was, but I didn't have the charge. And so for me, there was quite a lot of shame around how I showed up during that time of numbing, continual numbing, because I didn't like the person I was. I was in a work role where I wasn't happy. I wasn't thriving. I was literally just surviving. It looked all good and shiny on the outside, but underneath I was really crumbling inside. And so to be able to release that shame and sense of guilt for how I showed up during those particular years, that then just provides a new sense of freedom. And it's like a new place we can springboard from, instead of having this, whether we call it baggage or just things that have been weighing us down for years. I think just one other thing too, a really important thing that I'd like to share with people is take the signals from your own body. So if somebody says something to you and you feel like all of a sudden you've just been kicked right in the guts, or you feel like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, that's your body trying to communicate with you. So take it as a signal. Wow, I wonder, well, how come I'm feeling like that? And to create that choice point to have the pause. Because in those moments of pause, when we listen to our body, that's when the innate wisdom can come through. And sometimes it might not come through, but you think, do you know what, I'm going to make a note of that because I want to do a piece of work with someone who's highly skilled and can support me in exploring this, because I know it's a particular pattern that keeps recurring in my life.
Yeah, and I think that because we hear a lot of that in this space, and I think in wellness around listening to the signals, to the signs that the body is trying to communicate to you, which is 100% true and I believe in. And I think a big part of my journey and sounds like for yours as well is around not paying attention to those early signs and then, getting to that place of, a breakdown or with the body giving out or the emotions are really building until, you can't ignore it anymore. So I really invite whoever's listening to honor that and to think about maybe, what is a pattern that keeps on cropping up for me? Because I find that when the frustration of repeating the pattern or the pain of repeating the pattern begins to outweigh the pain of changing or dipping your toe in something like EFT, that's when things start to shift. And so deeply cathartic. I'm really touched to hear that it's had that impact on you, because I as well have carried a lot of shame and guilt from my numbing out days. And it's very liberating to let go of that and to integrate that as part of yourself and to build your own adventure, so to speak, with tapping. Like, that's why I love it so much, because you can really make it personal to, like you said, what is true for you in that moment, so that it does land in your bones and in your body, and it can have a somatic impact as well. Why now? Like, why is it worthwhile someone engaging with tapping during a time like this?
In today's world?
In today's world, yeah.
Look, I think the bombardment of information, of daily stresses, what is required of us to be able to show up for individuals in our workplace, for a partner, for family members, for aging parents, just to pay the next bill. There is so much that is weighing on us. If you feel that anything we've discussed today has resonated, dip your toe in. You've got absolutely nothing to lose. Like I did that day when I thought my friend was completely crackers, just to try it, because the sense in your physiology when you do is palpable. It can happen very quickly. It's not something you have to spend a lot of time on. Sure, if you've got a very checkered past and traumatic history, yes, there will be layers that can be worked with an experienced practitioner. But tapping might not be your thing. It might be that you're doing a particular yoga class, or you find your time to get closer to yourself is swimming or going for a run or just being in nature. Whatever it is for you, it's important that we just honour ourselves enough to know that we are worthy of that time for ourselves, because no one's going to do it for us. And you can't give from an empty cup. I think also too, as a society in the past, it was always thought of being selfish to spend this time on ourselves. Yet it's one of the greatest gifts, and the freedom that comes as a result of that, and then a greater felt sense of feeling you're on path, feeling that you're in flow with whatever it is you're doing. You're not banging your head up against a brick wall. you haven't got all these red traffic lights flashing at you, but you've got green lights just allowing you to flow through. When you pay attention to that and you do find that pause and you honour yourself enough to allow that time for self-nourishment. And I said self-nourishment the other day to somebody. She said, oh, it's really interesting. I thought I was just nurturing myself, but she said, I love nourishment because it's a far more active role. And we all need it because we need to be our best selves. And when we can come from that place, it doesn't cost us any money once you know how to tap and breathe. You can do it anywhere. If you're at work and feeling stressed out, you can take yourself off to the bathroom. I promise you no one's going to interrupt you there in that cubicle, and you can do 1 or 2 or 3 rounds of tap and breathe, feel grounded and come back to whatever it is you need to be doing next. And if frontline workers that we train in the foundation can do that for themselves in some of the most high pressure roles they're working in, anybody can.
As long as you got a pair of hands and a set of lungs.
Correct. That helps.
So you mentioned freedom, and I think in line with the technique itself, but also the theme of this show, I want to start bringing this in for a landing with you, Kate, by hearing from you, what does being liberated mean to you?
Being liberated is sitting here having this conversation with you and knowing that the words that my mother said to me not long before she passed, which was a couple of weeks before she passed, I said, Mum, is there anything that you want me to know? And she said, just be you. And I think if we can all just be ourselves, to have that opportunity to release things that have held us back in the past. We are all, in essence, divine humans, and we're doing our best on this journey of life. And being liberated is really being you and honouring that, and that's enough.
What a beautiful message from Mum. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Where can people find out more about you, Kate, and your work and tapping? Where would you suggest pointing them to?
So if you visit my website, katehelder.com, you'll actually find a really helpful resource there. It's called A Quick Start Guide to Inner Light Alchemy, and that's a framework that touches into 3 of the different things that I've shared with you today and gives you an opportunity to be able to do a little bit of work on that for yourself. And it's using the, with Laurie's blessing, her grace process technique that I've pared back into slightly different language that I think lands for different audiences. And also to the work of the Mind Heart Connect Foundation, mindheartconnect.org. We're doing and continue to do great work in the field within Australia and being able to support these frontline workers. So our hashtag for that is caring for the carer, and it translates back to whatever we all do for ourselves as carers and caregivers. So it's been an absolute honour and privilege to have this opportunity to have a fireside chat with you today.
It was beautiful, Kate. We'll have to get a fire for the next one.
You're on.
Yeah, we'll make sure to include those links in the show notes. And yeah, again, and I really honour you not only just for walking us through this beautiful technique, but also for your vulnerability and sharing how it's impacted you and your emotional well-being journey, Kate. I think, well, I believe that stories stay with us beyond information and facts, and your story is a really powerful one and will resonate with. So thank you so much for being a really beautiful, shining example of what following your heart can look like and where it can take you. And yeah, for whoever is listening, if this resonated with you, please share it with whomever you feel might benefit. And yeah, I do encourage you to reach out to Kate as well. Yeah, she's a real earth angel. So thank you for that, Kate.
Thank you. Thanks, David.